So today, assessments, and then we're going to do a seminar activity after the lecture about assessments. So the T-shirt message for today is a bit more detail about what the assessments are, and then how you're going to work in groups in order to do the assessments. So, just to recap, there will be four assessments. Two of those will be individual pieces of work. The other two will be group pieces of work. And they're all weighted equally. So there's 25% of the total course mark is available for each of those four bits of work. So rather than one big assessment, we've got four smaller assessments. So the assessment number one is this individual report that you write on your own and submit about systems thinking. So on Tuesday, I gave the first lecture, which was a primer about systems thinking or systems dynamics. I've set some reading from the Meadows book, Thinking in Systems, and we're going to carry on with that next week. With regards to what I want you to do for this particular report, the easiest way to think about this is that some of it will be based on the exam that I gave last year. So rather than last year, I assessed this module with a 50% total module mark being awarded from an exam, which actually pretty much everyone did very well. There were some very, very high marks into the 70s, 80s, even a mark that was over 90%. Now, the first section of that exam was about systems thinking, about the theory of system dynamics, and what I'm suggesting is that with regards to the course matter for your first report, then section A of the exam paper is going to be a good start for you to look at. And it's online. I think it's already online. I will check after this lecture, but if you go to the website and we go to the assessments page, then there's some more information about the assessments, and I have put the 2013 exam questions up there. Later on, I will be putting an actual report template. So if you remember in lecture 1, I think it was, I said that when it comes to producing your first piece of coursework, your first individual report, I'm actually going to give you a template with some sections and some guidance on what to put into the sections, because I don't want people to get stuck about how to write an essay or thinking about essay writing. It's really important that you understand some of the background and the theory behind system dynamics so then you can apply it as quickly as possible. So I want to make that as easy as possible so we can do it in good time. So next week I'm going to put this template up on the assessments tab as well. And we need to get cracking because I've said I want the report, that first report, done in week 5. So we're at the end of week 2. So there's going to be more systems discussion in the planetary boundaries lecture I'm going to give on Tuesday, and then also in this climate change workshop. So the next 2 weeks I really want to make some progress on making sure that we all understand the background, the theory, and then how we can apply some ideas in systems dynamics. The second assessment is another individual report, but this one something about what I've called the system storm. So I briefly mentioned John Beddington, and he was the guy who coined this notion of the perfect storm in a kind of socio-ecological context. By 2030, we're going to be needing to produce around about 50% more power, growing 50% more food, and gaining access to about 50% more fresh water. Just recently, Kofi Annan gave a talk where he talked about the perfect storm, and it's getting a lot of policy traction. So it's kind of out there, and people are appreciating that in the next few decades we're going to have to seemingly work the system much harder at the same time reducing our impacts on it. So the perfect storm in a way is a perfect system storm, because if you try and fix one element then you end up making some other components of that problem actually worse. So for that, again, in the first instance, if you have a look at the exam paper, then that would be based on sections B and C. Sections B and C where I gave some real-world examples, and then in section C it was like a longer essay-type question. Okay, so they're the two individual assessments. I'm a bit more relaxed about assessment 2 because we don't do that until just before we break for the end of term. It's quite a long term this year, so we've got much more time to do that. Group poster. This is the first element of your group work. So what I've suggested is that when you come to make your poster, you think about it as an infographic and use an application, something like Pictochart. One of the reasons I like Pictochart is it's free, and I like free things. It's also quite good for facilitating collaboration, it seems. We need to see how it works in class. And it's a very nice, easy-to-use way of visualizing some potentially complicated issues. And the motivation between the group poster is that I want you to take one, or ideally two, of the global challenges and then present them, show them, communicate them to a general audience. So you've got to tease out the important bits. You've got to tease out the interactions, the elements, the sources, the sinks, the flows, all these kind of ideas, and you've got to present that in an easily understood way to somebody who might have no idea what the global challenges are, never heard of a perfect storm, doesn't know what systems dynamics is. And you're going to do that in your groups. The final piece of assessment is the group presentations, and we're going to have all the group presentations at this Global Challenges conference at the end of term, so you've got the entire module in order to work on these. Now already, some of the feedback I'm getting, and I would expect this anyway, this is some people's reactions to the idea of giving a group presentation or public speaking. Some people, they quite like it. Some people quite be naturally. They feel quite natural speaking in front of people or communicating ideas. Some people get very, very nervous, and they don't like it, and they don't want to do it, and it's something that they are not really looking forward to at all. Kind of unfortunately for them, everyone has got to sort of do it, in that every group was going to have about 12 minutes. There's going to be 6 people in a group, so that means everybody speaks for about 2 minutes. 2 minutes isn't very long, but when you're giving a talk and it's not going well, it can feel like the end of time when you just want the ground to open up and for you to disappear into it. So it can be nerve-wracking, it can be stressful, and I appreciate that, and I want to try and help you as much as I can. The first thing I suggest is that when you come to think about giving a group presentation, is that we try and make it as interesting as possible, and we use something like Prezi. Has anyone used Prezi or seen Prezi before? Okay, a few people, right. So you can overdo Prezi. It has all these kind of zooming effects, and you can put loads of multimedia in there, and it can make you feel actually quite motion sick after a while. But it's a nice, quick and easy way of visualizing and making interesting presentations. It's certainly not death by PowerPoint. And also, just like Pictochart and some other applications, it seems particularly well disposed for collaboration, so you can work on these things remotely. So I was particularly worried about the fact that we had some group presentation work, or we had some group work to do over Easter. And I know a lot of you will disappear over Easter, but you're still meant to be working. So the kind of applications or systems that we use need to be scalable in the sense that you'll be able to contribute to the group work even though if you're not physically here. So Prezi seems to be able to do that. And again, we can see how that works over the course of the module. If it doesn't work for whatever reason, or if you want to use another application, or you want to produce a poster some other way, then that's fine. Have a chat with me and we'll see what we can work out. So, the report 1 is here, then report 2, just before we disappear for Easter. And then the conference is when we're going to have the group presentations. So, I want to point out that the last session before you disappear for Easter is something called a Giving a Talk workshop, where we will think about the components of a presentation, not just its content but also its style, how to give a talk, the kind of hints and tips and little tweaks in terms of performance to give an effective talk. So that's important in an academic context, but it's also important in a kind of financial context, in that the ability to work in groups, the ability to communicate your ideas to somebody who might not have your background or specialism, the ability to present information in an effective way is actually very useful and important and very valuable skill. It's a valuable skill in terms of when you come to write your CVs or when you're having a job interview, your ability to demonstrate that you've done this and that you're actually quite good at it, and some of your jobs may actually involve giving a presentation to a small group, sometimes a potentially very large group, then it's going to be in your interest to do it. So I think there's a good motivation for you to want to get involved and get a bit better at it. Okay? Now, change of subject. Who's this guy? How do I pronounce his surname? Anyone? Lebeoff? Okay. Big movie star. You heard about his kind of strange behavior lately on Twitter and stuff? Allegedly, he presented a film, or he produced a film. I think he produced, wrote, directed it. I don't know if he even featured in it. And he distributed it on the internet, and then some people watching this film, and they kind of came to the conclusion, that looks a bit familiar to a comic. And then when they actually referred to the comic, when they looked at the comic, it was a straight copy of this comic. And the author of the comic never even knew Shia what is it again? LaBeouf. You said that with great confidence, I believe you. Said he never met this guy, and basically he just nicked his idea. He then was kind of caught red-handed, so he went, okay, I'm sorry, and then he posted an apology. But then the apology he actually copied from somewhere else. And when they told him about that, he then gave another apology, this time via Twitter, but then that one was copied too. And ever since then, he's been producing a series of apologies, more and more elaborate, which have all been copied from other places. But importantly, cited without attribution. So this is the classic example of plagiarism. So, you all know about plagiarism. When you first came to this university, did they go on about plagiarism an awful lot in your first semester? Did they, invoke all these terrible things that are going to happen to you if you were to ever be found, caught plagiarizing? And did you conclude that nobody in their right mind would ever risk actually plagiarizing? Seems a reasonable thing to do. Unfortunately, people do it. Last year, in this module, I don't think there were any cases of plagiarism. I think there's two reasons for that. One, all the students were lovely. But two, the subject matter means it's very hard to plagiarize the material for this particular module. It's not as if there are examples of this module all over the world, and you can look on the internet or do a few Google searches about how to solve question 1B or something. The only way I think you'd really, maybe I should tell you, yeah. I think the only way that you're really going to be able to plagiarize effectively with this course is that you pay somebody to do your coursework for you. So there are various scales of plagiarism. The first one is you yank a copy off Google and you forget to attribute it. You don't put it in quotes, you don't give the citation or something. It's a mistake. And everybody makes mistakes now and again. And if you do make mistakes, that's fine. We just tell you it was a mistake. The other extreme is when you find somebody, sometimes on the internet, and you pay them potentially a lot of money, and they'll do their coursework for you. In fact, there are some people who will do your entire degree for you with suitable remuneration. But the thing is, in order for them to be able to do it, they'd have to understand what the assessments are. So you'd most probably have to spend a lot of time explaining what it is. And by the time you've done that, you might as well just do the assessment. So I think that's why plagiarism, in the context of this course, isn't a problem. But I want you to be aware of it. And if you've got any concerns, if you've got any problems, then please do talk to me. Has anybody used the kind of online plagiarism checking system? You can submit your... Hands up if anybody knows what I'm talking about. Turnitin, anyone? Okay, right. So there should be an option on Turnitin where you can submit your own work, and it will tell you, it will give you a score. You get a plagiarism score. It kind of has all these sophisticated databases and algorithms that it uses or something. I will let you know how to use that nearer the time, but it can be a very helpful tool, just to make sure that there aren't any accidental examples of plagiarism and we don't end up like Shia LaBeouf. Right. So, assessments. Half of it is individual stuff, half of it is group work. Now already, I would imagine some of you are thinking this, group work. Because the last thing you would ever associate with the word group is work, because most group work is like this. It's very, very dull, or it's just not productive at all. It's something that you kind of get made to do, a bit like citizenship. It's an improving activity. But nobody has any interest whatsoever in doing it, and it's just something you've got to get through, right? And I agree, right? Largely, group activities are a colossal waste of time, like meetings, but they just have to exist somehow. And the reason that groups are not very effective is that we're all different. Some people talk a lot. You cannot shut them up. Some people don't say a single thing at all, even though they've got something potentially really important to contribute. You've got pet topics, which everybody seems to obsess about, and then you can kind of go off and ramble on with off topics, what was on the TV last night. People get very defensive when they come up with an idea. They kind of propose something, and they want to make sure that everybody else agrees with them. You kind of have this groupthink mentality where everybody conforms to some kind of mean. It doesn't seem to be a very creative process. And the opposite end is when people just can't seem to get over the fact they can't agree or can't come to some kind of consensus, and there's a group war. It's a disaster. So I make the assumption that if half of the total module mark is going to be based on your group work, then there's something of a responsibility to give you some help on working with groups. Now, I don't mean this in a patronising way. I believe that you're all effective working in groups. I believe, you've done it before, but I just want to make sure. So the thing about groups and working in groups is that all these different kind of processes or activities or emotions are happening often all at the same time. There's somebody thinking about the objective. So what do we need to do, or what kind of facts do we need in order to do the things we want to do? There are emotions running around, I really don't like this, and I can't even say why. There's negative reasoning. This is a stupid idea because of X, Y, and Z. There's the inverse, which is there's lots of positive reasoning, and there's somebody being all creative and trying to bring it all together. And it all happens at the same time, and it's a mess. It's very unstructured, and you don't really seem to get anywhere. So what I want to talk about for the rest of this lecture, I think, and then what we're going to work in the seminar afterwards, is how can we put a bit of structure around some of our group work. Now, this is important. So this is a module about the global challenges. It's not a personal development workshop. I'm not, it's not a CV lab or something. But it's important. It's important in order for us to be able to make some sensible progress on these things that I call the global challenges, because the global challenges is a challenge of systems, and people typically are not very good at dealing with systems. They're not very good at understanding how one interaction or intervention has consequences and effects for other elements, and so you have to think outside the box, right? So you need to be a bit creative. So, who's heard of 6 hats? Anyone? Great. Right. So 6 hats is a thinking system that was most probably invented and patented by a guy called Edward de Bono, who's written loads and loads of books about how to think and how to be clever, critical thinking, critical reasoning. And it's a process by which you can effectively run group activities. Right. So the point is that you've kind of got different coloured hats. These are imaginary hats, although you can, if you want, actually make or provide your own coloured hats. And everybody wears the same colour hat at the same time. So we all do the same kind of reasoning, or we all do the same kind of thinking, and then you kind of progress through the different coloured hats. This is how it works. So the motivation is that rather than somebody wanting to be creative, or somebody wanting to be emotional, or somebody wanting to completely obsess about what facts, if everybody does it at the same time, then what you find, you rapidly progress through those different stages, and then you move on. It avoids confrontations, but it just gets people to focus on the particular problems or the particular tasks at hand. And arguably, the most important hat is this blue hat, which is called the process hat. The process hat is the boss of the game, right? It's the person who says, right, we've done enough of that, we're going to move on. And it's really important that when you do your group work, that everybody takes it in turns when it comes to being the blue hat. There'll be some people who like being the blue hat. They like to tell people what to do. They like managing everything. There'll be other people who don't really like it at all. The process hat, the blue hat, isn't a manager's hat. It's just allow the group to work effectively by progressing through those different coloured hats. So everybody should take a turn. Also, some people should be taking notes. Ideally more than one person, and it shouldn't be the blue hat person. So, the last thing I want to say about particular groups is that this is an overeducated problem, and what you often find in groups, especially when you're coming up with something, you've got to come up with some kind of solution, is that it's not an argument. The point of the group is not to impose your will on the other members of the group or somehow to convince them that you're right or argue against a particular proposition. I mean, the idea is that you have an initial problem and you've got to come up with a solution. And the assumption is that the solution you're only going to make is a team. Team! I know it's 9 o'clock on a Friday, but these are quite important concepts in the sense of the team element, the working in a group element is important because you're not going to get there on your own. Certainly in a broader context, we're not going to get there on our own in individual disciplines when it comes to the global challenges. And later on in the module, I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, they're almost funny, but they're kind of tragic, about how people have tried to address or solve particular global challenges, and it's been a spectacular disaster because they haven't engaged with other people outside their relatively narrow discipline or arguably even their very narrow worldview. So you're only going to get there working as a team. So, as an activity, this is an example of a self-organizing system. Remember I talked about those flocks of starlings and those simple 3 rules? I just wanted to put this up here because these aren't real birds, these are things called boids. It's a simple computer simulation. But they're just doing those 3 rules, not too far, not too close, move in the same kind of direction. So what I want to do is I want you to form, self-organize into groups of 6. So some of you this is going to be easy because you're most probably already in a proto group. Some this might be a bit challenging. The simple rules of this game is I'm suggesting that everybody in the group is of the same year. Now, if you're not in the same year and you're happy with it, that's fine. I know some people get a bit worried about, first years get a bit worried that they think that the assessment's going to be too hard, or the third years get worried because they think that they're in their final year, they have to really worry about their, especially semester 2, they have to worry about their overall mark. So you might have different kind of interests or motivations. If that's not the case and you're happy about it, then by all means have a mix of years. But in the first instance, I would suggest that you keep to the same year. And the really difficult thing is I'm suggesting that you find as wide a mix of program of study as possible. So don't have mono subjects. Have some kind of diversity, ideally between the natural and the physical sciences. So let's try that for 5 or 10 minutes and I'll come round and see how we're doing.